Later on, I'll be joined by Mkawasi Mcharo Hall, who is a lecturer at Howard University. But Prof, let me start with you. Thanks for making time for us. I don't know what time it is there, but I'm sure it's been a busy morning for you. Now, tell us this, Professor. It's been an unusually tense run-up to this particular election. Why?
So thank you for having me. It's been particularly challenging because the incumbent, Donald Trump, has been very determined to win this election, and he's pulling all tricks out of the hat. So he's been very determined to play unorthodox methods through rhetoric, through deepening the rhetoric to get his base out to vote, and also through inflammatory attacks, not only on minority groups, but also on immigrants and also on other minority represented communities. So this has been a particularly challenging period in the United States. Let's also not forget that this election is overshadowed by the COVID-19 pandemic and an economy that's in its worst recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s. So that, coupled with the social movements of Black Lives Matter, has created a very volatile political situation.
Okay, Prof, I think you've captured and summarized the issues for us very succinctly. Tell me this, how's election day going so far? Where are you exactly, and have you managed to go out? Have you voted? If it's not a very personal question, feel free to share that with us. That's
totally fine. I'm planning to vote later in the evening. Our polling centers here close at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm planning later in the evening to go to my polling center and cast my ballot. I'm very excited about the election because don't forget that apart from the presidential election, we have Senate races, some of which are very close. The Senate is balanced very evenly between the Democrats and Republicans. Democrats have 47 seats, Republicans have 53. So the Democrats are hoping through this election they'll gain more Senate seats. And then we have a lot of local state ballot initiatives, which I'm also excited about. So I'll go to vote later in the day, but by and large, I'm very enthusiastic. I think the country is ready to make a decision. And I think whatever the outcome, the office bearers will have to accept the results of the people.
Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to have Mkawasi Mcharo Hall joining us for this brief discussion as well. But Prof, tell me this, how serious are the concerns about a post-election standoff? Could we see legal challenges after this election? President Donald Trump actually said his lawyers are on standby in case they see certain things that they're not happy with, especially about the complication of so many people who voted a bit earlier on thanks to the postal system, and whose votes, President Donald Trump is concerned, could be used to rig, the poll in his opponent's favor. And also the talk about possible unrest. I don't want to use the word violence, but discussion about unrest in certain parts of the states. How serious are these concerns there where you are?
So I guess I'd answer your question in two parts. So the first part is in relation to the electoral legitimacy, which is a norm that traditionally has never been contested. So usually when you have elections in the US, both contesting parties agree to the results of the election. But Trump has been very unusual because he's challenged the legitimacy of the election. And we are definitely looking at a legal challenge. Trump has guaranteed that. And what most Americans are hoping is that the margin of victory for whoever wins will be large enough so that it's fairly obvious who has won. However, because of part of the balloting in states like Wisconsin and Ohio in particular, where they've accepted to accept ballots that are date stamped but come after the election date, there's potential for legal challenges there. Also in states like Florida, which will be key to the victory of whoever will win, the 29 Electoral College votes of Florida, depending on how close the margins are there, we could end up with a situation like what we had in 2000. To the second part of your question in relation to the unrest or violence, if you would call it that, I think I'd look at that in two sets. On one hand, people are obviously concerned about violence and after effects of the election, but I think the law enforcement authorities here have that covered. But secondly, traditionally in this country, whenever a Democrat looks like they're about to win an election, whether it was Obama or Biden right now, people who love guns and don't like gun control tend to accelerate their buying of guns. So that also has to be looked at in that context. Gun owners are afraid that if Biden wins, that there'll be restrictions in terms of their rights to own guns. So that also needs to be factored in. So by and large, I think people are very enthusiastic. Most people are going out to vote unconcerned because they know the police and law enforcement will take care of any violence that there is.
Prof, I've got just one or two more questions for you even as we wrap this up. You alluded I've got one or two final questions before we wrap this up. You alluded to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and how Trump has handled it as one of the big issues around this particular election. And I wanted you to talk a bit more about that, bearing in mind here in Kenya, tomorrow there's a COVID-19 conference to talk about the impact of COVID-19 here. We've seen a situation where tonight the Deputy President of Kenya has actually called off weekend rallies as COVID-19 numbers go up. How would you describe the situation there for Kenyans in regards to COVID-19 and its impact on that election?
I think it's been very devastating, Wahiga. I mean, if you could imagine, 250,000 Americans have died. So this is a very serious thing. And I can speak from my personal perspective in terms of being an educator. Some of my students have passed away. Some of them have had some of their parents and loved ones get COVID and get sick. A lot of people have lost jobs. And it's a very difficult situation here in terms of the economy. So with that in perspective, this is definitely a global problem, and it's a problem that Trump has just not handled effectively. And my understanding and my feeling is on November 4th, the results will definitely reflect that. People are very frustrated. It's devastated the US economy, and a lot of people have lost a lot of jobs, and it will take quite a bit of time to recover from that. It's also affected our global communication. So for example, our direct flights from New York to Nairobi have been discontinued. That's affected Kenya, that's affected students. There's a lot of people wanted to travel back to Kenya for vacation, for December, Christmas, but now you cannot do that. So this is a really, really major problem. And I think it's a referendum on the Trump presidency to see exactly where Americans what Americans feel about his presidency. Will they give him 4 more years to continue, or will this be a chance for Biden and the Democrats to take over? And we'll only know the results of that on November the 4th.
I was actually you've actually touched on my last question. Will you know, will the results be known by November 4th? How sure are you of that? When can the race be called?
So this is part of the challenge. Traditionally, based on exit polling and based on the way different districts have voted in a normal election, whether it was 2016 or 2000 or 2012, a lot of those results could be tabulated. But remember, this time, Wahiga, a lot of people voted by mail. And a lot of these ballots will be counted, for example, in states like Wisconsin and Ohio after the election. So we might see a gap of probably up to 2 or 3 days before some actual results come through. However, if Trump loses Florida and he loses Pennsylvania, then his path to win the presidency will be particularly challenging. But within this particular environment in the US, the highly charged political energy, we look forward to some legal challenges on the electoral process. But as I said, the hope here is that whoever wins by a large enough margin that any legal recourse that either of the candidates has will essentially be moot.
Prof, thank you so much. It's been a quick interview, but you've helped Kenyans understand quite a bit about what's happening. Let me release you as you prepare yourself to go and vote a bit later on. And of course, apologies to our viewers. We had a challenge getting Mkawasim Charo Hall on the line. She's a lecturer at Howard University. So we'll talk to her on a different program. But that was Professor